Serious, what's the creepiest true story that happened to you or someone you know? Here are some of the craziest, most unforgettable Reddit stories you'll ever hear. Each one different, each one real. If any of these remind you of something you've been through, I'd love for you to share your experience in the comments. You never know who might relate. Let's dive in. If one of these feels familiar, or just too good not to talk about, leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Story 1, I just moved into a basement suite. Every time I went out, I would lock the deadbolt, but not the door handle. But when I came home, a lot of the time the deadbolt would be unlocked and the door handle would be locked. At first, I thought I was just confused about which one I had locked, so I started paying more attention. It kept happening, and I realized someone must be going in when I went out. I assumed it was the landlady and was annoyed but didn't say anything at first. Then one day I came home and found the wrong lock locked again. I went in pissed off and opened the fridge to get something to eat. There was a book in the fridge that I had never seen before. I collected old books, and this one was published in the early 1900s, which creeped me out completely because it was like it had been left for me. I finally called my landlady and asked if she was going into my apartment and told her what had happened. She freaked right out, said the last person who lived there was a really creepy guy with mental health and drug problems. She got all the locks changed that day, and it never happened again. Story 2, back in the 70s, my grandfather dropped my grandmother, Mom, and her 2 sisters off to do some shopping on his way to work. Since he wasn't able to pick them up, they hitchhiked home. My mom at the time was only around 10 or 11, middle sister would have been about 7 or 8, and the youngest was about a year old. They get picked up by a guy in pickup truck, who has them all sit in the back row with one of them holding the baby. My grandmother was giving directions to their home from the highway, but the guy ignored her and went by their exit claiming he had to make a stop first. Didn't really say much else to them during the drive. My mom remembers my grandmother being very quiet and very nervous. Eventually they come up to a farm. Driver tells them to wait in the car and goes inside the house. While he's gone, they just sit there terrified. They're in the middle of nowhere and know they couldn't make it out on foot. A few minutes later, the driver comes out with a second guy who looks into truck and sees my mom's youngest sister. He starts flipping out, screaming at the driver that he shouldn't have brought the baby back. They aren't going to do anything with her, and some other things I can't remember. Ends up telling him to get them away from the farm. Driver gets back into the truck, apologizes, and they get back on the highway and drive again in silence. My grandmother, normally a very smart woman, had him drive directly to their house, although I suspect her reasoning was she'd already given him the address before anything seemed off. They lived at that house for several years and luckily never saw either of them a second time. Story 3, warning in advance. This is not a funny story. Important bit of context. This was happened around 1995. In freshman year of middle school, 6th grade, there was a once-a-week group therapy session with Develop. Mentally delayed kids that involved them doing some crafts activity, or playing with Legos, or watching a movie as a group. It was half normal kids, half DD kids, and the normal kids could sign up for it. I signed up pretty instantly as it meant an escape from history once a week. One of my best friends at the time had the same idea, and it basically turned into a second lunch period for us. The whole thing was overseen by a therapist named Bruce, and it was generally pretty laid back. Bruce was an overweight 50-ish balding guy with the attitude and general appearance of Santa Claus. He ran most of the school's extracurriculars and was pretty much universally liked. The other important player in this story was a kid who I'll call G. You know that stereotype of psychopaths being obsessed with animal torture as a kid? This was dead on G. He'd regularly tell these long, excited stories during group about how much fun he had last week, tearing the leg off a squirrel he caught in his live trap, or other similar things. Most of us just sort of ignored him, as it was just sort of assumed that he was all talk and just making up gross stuff to get attention. So one week we were playing with Play-Doh. Since it was a DD group, the huge tub of Play-Doh had long since assumed a uniform shade of turd brown, and the general drive was to get people to build things and tell stories about them. Most people just built dinosaurs or threw clay at each other. G, for whatever reason, had a huge flat square slab laid out and was building 4 large pillars on the corners. He eventually put a roof on it, which wouldn't stay on due to the lack of interior supports. The normal kids would always leave a few minutes early as the group ran right into the start of the next period, and we'd need time to get to class. I was no different, and walked out while Bruce and the DD kids were smashing Play-Doh, giggling and throwing chunks of dough back into the bin. I got to my next class and the teacher wasn't there. Nobody knew what was going on. About 10 minutes later, she finally showed up looking frazzled and wouldn't give us any information other than something happened that needed staff attention. Being 6th graders, we went nuts with speculation. A few hours later, I ran into the friend from group who was visibly jumpy and disturbed. He wouldn't tell me why other than mentioning that therapy group was cancelled indefinitely. I kept prying for information and eventually got the story out of him. So during the cleanup, the Play-Doh had to be compacted back into its tub. This involved lots of smashing Play-Doh sculptures, a bit that the DD kids greatly enjoyed to the point where they'd try to smash other people's stuff. G's house was one of the last things to go. He smashed down 2 columns, let one of the other DDs smash another, and finally dared Bruce to smash the last one really hard. The last one with the pocket knife in it. I never saw either Bruce or G ever again. Story 4, my mom was kidnapped, blindfolded, taken to a dark place she still isn't sure was even a man-made structure, and then tied to a chair. The guy that took her kept talking to her the entire time. She has never told me details except that the man was crazy. After a while, she started talking to him, asking him questions, getting him to talk to her about less crazy stuff. She isn't sure how long this went on, just that it was a long time. After quite some time, the man whom she never saw directly or recognized the voice of told her, "I don't know why, but I need to let you go." My guess is that she humanized herself enough to him so that he couldn't go through with whatever it was he had initially kidnapped her for. He loaded her back up in the car and dropped off, still blindfolded, at a convenience store up the road from where she lived, told her to count to 1,000 before taking the blindfold off. Then he left. After she got home and told her parents they didn't believe her and thought she was making it up so that she wouldn't get in trouble for being out late. Story 5, when I was about 9 or 10, my older brother and I had a few friends over to stay the night. My dad had to work the next day, so we were all left at the house by ourselves for the day. We were excited to play PlayStation all day on our Saturday off. Well, my dad worked late that night until probably 8 or 9. As soon as the sun went down, we went into one of the rooms upstairs to play Uno. Fast forward 30 minutes, and we start hearing footsteps slowing walking up the wooden stairs. My dad wasn't going to be home for another 2 hours, so we didn't know who it was. There were 4 of us, me, my brother, my friend, and his friend. We would take turns walking out of the room to see what it was, but before we could look down the dark stairs, we would hear what sounded like someone running down the stairs as fast as they could, so they couldn't be seen. This continued for probably 2 hours, ending with all of us huddled in the room upstairs with the door wedged shut with a chair until my dad got home. None of us were really believers in anything paranormal, but a child's imagination is a crazy thing. Now 15 years later, I still don't know what to make of it, but every one of us heard those footsteps walking up those dark stairs. I bring it up to my friend who I'm still friends with, and he remembers it just as vividly as I do. It kind of creeps me out just thinking about it. Story 6, it was 2001, and my friend and I were 17, both female, and driving back from a late movie to my house one night. I lived in a pretty rural area in Maine, about 20 minutes from the nearest town. As we were driving down the highway through the woods, we passed a median with a car sitting in it, facing in the oncoming direction, with all its lights off. Right after we drove past it, it flashed its lights, did a 3-point turn, and started driving behind us. We giggled that, oh, it must be a gang initiation, we're gonna get murdered. Because this was Maine, and that was obviously not what was happening. The turnoff for my road was a few miles away, and this car stayed behind us the whole time. We made the left turn, and the car kept going down the highway. Phew, but 30 seconds later, we realized that the car must have backed up on the highway and made the turn after us. Now we were getting a little worried. There was still one more road to turn down before we got to my house. This is way in the woods, and the car did the same thing. Backed up and made the left after us. Now we were legit freaked. I had a long driveway, and the car followed us right into the driveway and almost up to my house, which had all the lights on because my mom was home. We ran into my house, just in time to see the mystery car reverse back down the driveway and drive away. To this day, we still have no idea why that car was following us, if they thought we were someone else, or if they actually had bad intentions and only changed their mind when they saw that my house lights were on. Since we only ever saw the front of the car, we didn't get a license plate or a better description than a blue car. Story 7. Once as a teenager, I was leaving a fast food drive-through, and someone in an old Bronco started to follow me. At first I thought it was a road rage situation and did the sorry wave and tried to let him pass, but he swerved at me like he was trying to hit my car. He pulled up alongside of me and was screaming out the window, just incoherently furious, continuing to swerve at me. This was before the days of cell phones, and I was in an unfamiliar area of town. I was driving a Firebird and tried to outrun him, but he would run red lights and make crazy turns to keep up with me. I eventually ran into a dead end, and he pulled his truck across the road to block it. There were big ditches on either side, so I was stuck. He got out and started scrambling at my door handle doors, locked and pounding on the windows. His face inches from mine, just screaming and screaming in a way that seemed like he couldn't even quite see me. Shaking and crying, I turned on my overhead light so he could see I was just a teenage girl and not who he was looking for, and he jumped on my hood and started pounding and drooling in thick, white smears on my windshield. I was screaming and crying, and he stopped, held up one finger like wait a minute, and scurried off to his truck. I floored the gas and ran into the ditch and drove like a crazy person for 45 minutes until I knew I had lost him. No idea what his deal was. My mom thought I made up this entire story to lie about the damage to my car, and still seems hesitant to believe me. Story 8. When I was a child, I was always stricken by this irrational fear that when I went outside at night, I had to walk straight into the house without looking back, because if I looked back, someone would be following me. One day after dinner, I went out to the car to get my book bag, and I was continuing my ritual of walking straight inside without looking back, adrenaline pumping, anxiety going full force, and I just stopped and said to myself, "This is stupid." I made myself look back. When I looked back, I saw what appeared to be someone crouched down behind my mom's car and was peeking their head around. They were just staring at me and smiling. It appeared to be a woman in her mid-30s, maybe 40, with curly short blonde hair. We made eye contact for a second, and then she ducked back behind the car where I couldn't see her. I stood frozen for a second and then ran inside. I told my mom. We went outside to check. No one was there. My mom didn't exactly not believe me, but she wasn't very concerned either. Story 9. This story certainly felt creepy when it was happening. I was in the orthopedic surgery wing of the hospital after getting my torn Achilles tendon repaired. It was a fairly long procedure, and I was pretty groggy from the anesthesia after effects combined with the morphine for the pain. But I did notice that I had a roommate that had both of his hands and feet wrapped in bandages. I could hear him talking to his father, but didn't pay much attention because of how out of it I was at the time. I did remember hearing something about, "Why did you stop taking your medication?" I don't know how morphine affects anyone else, but it gives me a very restless sleep combined with vivid dreams, almost nightmares, something I never have. So in the middle of the night, while turning over for the 100th time, I spied someone standing beside my bed in the dark. "Do you have any smokes?" My roommate apparently was standing there watching me sleep, waiting for me to wake up to ask for a cigarette. It could be considered being very polite or very creepy, but when you are in a morphine-induced haze, it was definitely creepy. Later that day, I heard the details of why he was there. He had gone off his meds and decided to quit smoking hardcore. I mean liquid nitrogen cold turkey. First, he nailed his feet to the floor, so he couldn't go out for smokes. Then he took a butcher knife from the kitchen and cut off the fingers of his left hand so he couldn't hold a cigarette, That's where his plan kind of fell apart, because he had a lot of trouble cutting off the right fingers with no left fingers to hold the knife. He only got though 3 of them. I put this together between the conversations I overheard between family, nurses, and doctors. I was supposed to be in there for another day, but they told me I could go home early if I was okay with taking Tylenol 3 for the pain. I would have to stay if I needed the stronger morphine pain killer so the staff could administer it. I said I would go home with aspirin if it meant getting out of that room. The head nurse at the nursing station was sympathetic. She said the guy really needed to be in a different kind of hospital, but he had orthopedic issues that had to be dealt with, and that's why he was there. It wasn't supernatural, just a mentally disturbed individual who had hurt himself. He probably couldn't even have hurt anyone else considering his injuries, but in my morphine fog it was creepy as hell to me to have someone that disturbed 10 feet away while I was sleeping. Story 10. When I was in college, I lived in a decently safe apartment complex. You needed a gate clicker for your car, and the foot entrance required a code. All doors had a deadbolt, and extensive locks for the sliding patio door. Well, when the complex went under new management, the footpath gate code stopped working so anyone could push it open. In mid-October, a note was sent out to all residents stating that a new gate code would be issued in the following days, and for everyone to keep their doors locked due to suspicious behavior. The following week, another note was sent out describing a man that had been seen peering over balconies and through windows, but the gate code still hadn't been fixed. On Halloween, I distinctly remember locking my deadbolt after a night out because I had friends staying over, and I usually locked my door anyway since I lived alone. I woke up the next morning, and my door was unlocked. I asked if anyone had went outside, and they all said no. The following night I was by myself, and a little skeptical of my door, so I made it a point to check my door before I went to sleep. Wake up next morning, and the door is unlocked. I was a little freaked out, so I scanned my apartment for anything missing, or a sign that someone had been in there. Nothing, so by the 3rd night I was damn sure I locked my door, and checked my sliding door locks as well. Around 5:30/6 a.m. my cat started to get restless, so I threw her in the living room until I was ready to wake up. She starts making some weird noises a few minutes later, so I go into the living room and hear a weird noise, like a thud or something. I look at my door and it's fucking unlocked. By this time, I'm freaking out. Called my apartment manager and got them to inspect my apartment to make sure there was no way for anyone to get in, and had my locks changed. Never happened again, but I'm about 99% sure someone had been sneaking into my apartment when I wasn't home and watching me sleep. Maybe I was just being paranoid, but I know for a fact I had locked my door all 3 nights. TL, dear lived alone in an apartment. Door became unlocked 3 nights in a row. Potentially had someone watch me sleep. Story 11. I was a chaperone for a Girl Scout camping trip. When I was 16, the kids were about 5-9 years old. I had a cabin with 6 kids I was in charge of at night and helped out during the day. Night 1, one of my kids had a bit of a developmental issue. I wake up to her leaving the cabin. I chase after her thinking she is going to the latrine, but she's sleepwalking. I'm out in the dark barefoot trying to coax this creepy kid back inside when I hear something big out in the woods. I grab the kid and she starts screaming like an infant and goes stiff. I carry her back inside. Everyone in my cabin is awake. I don't sleep the rest of the night. Day 2, Sleepwalker is moved to another cabin. That afternoon, when I'm walking the kids back from the latrine, Sleepwalker and another kid sneak away from the group. I realize they are gone, get help, find kids 15 minutes later. Back at camp, they start telling scary stories about their sneaking away, saying it was the kitty cow, who lives in the woods. Night 2, wake up and it's gotten cold. Get up to close the windows and shutters and see a light in the woods, like someone has a lantern. It walks to a point in the woods, then stops. I stay still in the dark and watch it for a long while, about to shrug it off when the light moves again, coming around and going down the side of the cabin, closer, but not close enough to see who is carrying it. I realize it's heading to the window by the kids' bunk beds, sneak over and close the window and shutters. The light stays close on the other side of the shutters for a long time before moving on and disappearing. Day 3, tell adults about light. They dismiss it as probably a ranger checking the campsite. Kids by this time are totally freaking each other out over Kitty Cow, literally starting to be afraid to leave the craft area in broad daylight because Kitty Cow might be there. There's all sorts of weird Kitty Cow stories. That afternoon, we find out a bear broke into another camp and ate food, so in addition to a real threat, we think that may be the origin of Kitty Cow. Plus, it would make sense that there would be rangers out looking, as there's a bear on the loose. Night 3, I stay up listening to music to see if the lights will come back. About 1 a.m., I see it coming by again walking to a point in the woods and waiting. Around 1:30, it starts closer to the cabin. As it's walking around the side, I hear one of the other chaperones start to yell, "Hey, who is that? Who's out there?" The light cuts off. I yell back to the chaperone that I saw it too. What should we do? I'm terrified at this point. The chaperone tells me to bring my kids over to her, holding hands. We all cram in one cabin, and a bit later a thunderstorm starts. For another night, I basically don't sleep. The next day, everyone sort of laughs it off again, sort of saying we weren't seeing anything, that maybe it was heat lightning or the kids were playing with flashlights and we saw them reflected. I'm so sleep deprived it hurts, and I'm hearing popping noises. I end up being paired with another chaperone, and we go for a hike with the kids. It's all foggy in the woods, and the kids are really strung out between the excitement the night before, which they blame on Kitty Cow. Out in the woods, the kids start claiming they are seeing Kitty Cow everywhere, sneaking up on us. I can't tell you now how weird and terrifying things got then. You had this silent hill fog. All the girls are wearing matching ponchos, so the scene was surreal. The kids are freaking out over every tree, screaming Kitty Cow is coming to get them, and I'm barely held together on no sleep, convinced myself that some weirdo has been creeping around our camp. Things literally devolve into mass hysteria. The kids are literally falling to the ground, screaming and sobbing, and the other chaperone leaves. She just books it out of the forest back to camp while I am coaxing, pulling, and carrying screaming children out of the mist. I got the kids almost back to camp when the other chaperones come rushing out. The chaperone who left claimed she saw a bear and ran for her life. I didn't leave any kids behind. I have never and will never experience anything as creepy and terrifying as that afternoon in the woods. While nothing happened, it's haunted my dreams since then. Story 12. When I was around 14 years old, I really liked to go for runs with my Shepherd X-Lab. I lived in a fairly quiet, clean suburban neighborhood that was situated beside a broad expanse of pasture used by about 10 horses. I would say it was roughly 40 acres. Anyway, a bike path ran between the pasture and my neighborhood, and I generally ran down the path. One night I decided to go with my pup around 10:00 p.m. May not seem like the smartest decision, but I had spent many nights with my group of friends biking/roller blading around the neighborhood, so I thought nothing of the late hour. I was running down the bike path with my dog, who is a big pup yet the friendliest guy you'll meet. As we ran, I noticed a dark lump a little ways ahead, and because it was nearly pitch black, I could barely see it. I dismissed it as a garbage bag. As we drew closer, my dog perked up his ears and his hackles went up and he started to growl, which he rarely ever does. He loves basically everything. I stopped running and stared as the garbage bag started to move. 14-year-old me still didn't really know what the heck I was looking at, and it wasn't until the supposed garbage stood up that I realized it was a man, who then started to run towards us. My dog then turned around and, I kid you not, started to run and yanked me along behind him. We reached a street. He darted down it, then pulled me into a dark alley onto another street, then another alley, then another street, until we somehow lost the guy. My dog saved my life, I'm pretty sure. The guy may not have been an ex-murderer, but it turns out some creepy ex-felon was arrested in our neighborhood about 2 days later. I love my dog's story. 13 rented a cabin for a week with my first night. There we had spent the day visiting her family, the actual reason for our trip. Had dinner, she got pretty wasted. Get back to the cabin, carry my inside to find all our bags opened/dumped onto the floor. This set me into panic mode. I hadn't been drinking, and I routinely carry, so I pull out my gun and sweep the house. I check every room, closets, even under the bed, nothing. My is still fast asleep, so I check our stuff over, and there's nothing missing. It had just been dumped onto the floor. So I look around some more. All the windows are locked. The back door was even dead bolted. It just really bothered me that there was no sign of break-in. I know I locked the place before I left, so either someone else had a key to my cabin, or whoever it was still inside the cabin. Either way, I didn't think I'd do much sleeping. It was too late to make other arrangements, and considering that most likely there wasn't anything to worry about really, we had been gone all day from 9 a.m. midnight, so odds whoever it was probably way earlier. But still, I couldn't shake it. I went in and covered up my sew, used the bathroom, set up a rocking chair facing the front door, my hand on my gun on my lap. I started watch. I felt pretty silly sitting there, but I couldn't not sit there either. And sometime around 3-4 a.m. I fell asleep. I woke up the next morning around 7 a.m., sun shining through. I actually half scared myself because I hadn't meant to fall asleep, which then scared me again because I wasn't holding my gun. I start looking around, and on the couch is my gun. I'm like, what? Then I look, the front door is wide open. I'm like, no fucking way. I jump up and start running to check on my so thank God she was still there, untouched. I go back out into the living room and pick up my gun. All my bullets are missing. I go outside and look around. Car and everything is still there, no signs of anybody. I walk back inside, look in the far corner of the living room, and I see the corner of the main living room rug lifted up. I investigate, it's covering the opening to the crawl space. That means this guy was in my cabin the entire time. I must have pulled up and caught the guy in the act. He thought fast and hid in the crawl space. Then sometime during the night, crawled out, disarmed me, and walked right out the front door. TL, dear, rented a cabin, came back for the night, found our stuff dumped on the floor, put my sew to bed, stayed in the living room with my gun in case they came back. Fell asleep, woke up the next morning to my gun on the couch, a hidden crawl space door open, and the front door open. The person was hiding in the crawl space the entire time, and worse, came out while I was sleeping and disarmed me. Story 14.